Experienced.
Experienced.
An experienced pilot.
An experienced public speaker. She is experienced and self-assured.
Blake's very experienced in microsurgery. Blake's very experienced in microsurgery.
Experiential.
Experiential.
Experimental approaches to learning. Experimental approaches to learning. Experiment.
Experiment.
Experiments with alcohol-fueled cars.
Experiments on sleep deprivation.
Many small birds guide themselves by the stars, as has been verified by experiment. Many small birds guide themselves by the stars, as has been verified by experiment. Many small birds guide themselves by the stars, as has been verified by experiment.
An experiment in state socialism. He experimented with lighter-than-air flight. He experimented with lighter-than-air flight. The teacher provided some different materials and left the children to experiment.
I would defend the right of scientists to experiment on animals.
She admitted she had experimented with cocaine.
Experimental.
Experimental.
A hypothesis is tested by finding experimental evidence for it. Experimental studies on birds and animals.
Experimental animals. An experimental theatre group.
Experimentally.
Experimentally.
Data obtained experimentally.
The drugs are being used experimentally on patients suffering from breast cancer.
He moved his shoulder experimentally. It still hurt.
Experimentation.
Experimentation.
Experimentation with computer-assisted language learning.
The issue of animal experimentation is an emotive subject.
Experimentation with cannabis.
There is often a period of sexual experimentation during adolescence.
Expert.
Expert.
He's a world expert on marine mammals.
An expert in statistics.
Tests should be administered by a medical expert. The police are expert at handling situations like this in strict confidence. The police are expert at handling situations like this in strict confidence.
He cast his expert eye on the gardener's work.
Ministers depend on civil servants for expert advice.
Expertise.
Expertise.
What he's bringing to the company is financial expertise.
Trainee engineers with varying degrees of computer expertise.
Expertise in the management of hotels.
Expert system.
Expert system.
Expert witness.
Expert witness.
He appeared as an expert witness before several government inquiries.
Expiate.
Expiate.
She expiated her crime by becoming a nun.
Expiration.
Expiration.
Expire.
Expire.
My passport expires next week.
Players whose contracts expire this summer.
My driving license expires in March. The lease on the flat expired on June the 14th. The lease on the flat expired on June the 14th.
The chairman's term of office has already expired.
Ophelia expires in Act 4 of Hamlet.
Expiry.
Expiry.
The formal expiry of the presidential term in September. The formal expiry of the presidential term in September. Only 7 minutes remained before the expiry of the noon deadline. Check the expiry date on your passport. Eggs must be marked with an expiry date that is 10 days from the date of packing.
Explain.
Explain.
He carefully explained the procedure.
The librarian will explain how to use the catalogue system.
Let me explain what I mean.
He explained that it had been a difficult film to make.
I explained the situation to my bank manager.
Wait, I can explain everything.
How can you explain that sort of behaviour?
She explained that she'd been ill. She explained that she'd been ill.
I'll explain why I don't believe your story. I'll explain why I don't believe your story.
That still doesn't explain how he was able to hide the body. That still doesn't explain how he was able to hide the body.
I'm going to give you 5 seconds to explain yourself.
Sorry, I'm not explaining myself very well.
The difference in the treatment they receive is hard to explain away.
Explanation.
Explanation.
Can you think of any explanation for this failure?
The concert was cancelled without explanation.
The ability to give clear explanations is the most important quality of the ideal teacher.
I'll try and give you a quick explanation of how the machine works.
Explanatory.
Explanatory.
There are explanatory notes at the end of each chapter.
Expletive.
Expletive.
Explicable.
Explicable.
The success of the revolution is explicable in terms of the weakness of the king's government.
Explicate.
Explicate.
It is essentially a simple notion, but explicating it is difficult. It is essentially a simple notion, but explicating it is difficult.
Explicit.
Explicit.
The contrast could not have been made more explicit.
Explicit knowledge of grammar.
The kidnappers gave us explicit instructions not to involve the police. The kidnappers gave us explicit instructions not to involve the police.
Be explicit when you talk about money with your family.
He made the rules without being explicit about them.
The film contains some very explicit love scenes.
Sexually explicit language.
Explode.
Explode.
The device was thrown at an army patrol but failed to explode. The device was thrown at an army patrol but failed to explode.
Far sooner than anyone thought possible, the Russians exploded an atomic bomb.
Florida's population exploded after World War II. Florida's population exploded after World War II.
Paul exploded. "What has it got to do with you?" he yelled.
She exploded with grief and anger.
He told a joke which made Hank explode with laughter. He told a joke which made Hank explode with laughter.
He exploded into a screaming, kicking rage. He exploded into a screaming, kicking rage.
Riots may explode at any time.
The continued tension could explode into more violence.
The program sets out to explode the myth that some delicate tropical fish are impossible to keep. The program sets out to explode the myth that some delicate tropical fish are impossible to keep.
A clap of thunder exploded overhead. Exploded.
Exploded.
An exploded diagram of an engine.
Exploit.
Exploit.
Home workers can easily be exploited by employers.
The violence was blamed on thugs exploiting the situation. The violence was blamed on thugs exploiting the situation. The violence was blamed on thugs exploiting the situation.
The new TV companies are fully exploiting the potential of satellite transmission.
Exploit.
The urgent need to exploit the resources of the Irish Sea.
The violence was blamed on thugs exploiting the situation.
The daring exploits of the British Parachute Regiment.
Exploitation.
Exploitation.
The film industry thrives on the sexual exploitation of women. The film industry thrives on the sexual exploitation of women.
The controlled exploitation of resources.
Greater exploitation of these data.
The exploitation of religion for political ends.
Exploitative.
Exploitative.
The exploitative nature of multinational companies.
Exploration.
Exploration.
Oil exploration facilities in the North Sea.
You can then use this hut as a base for explorations into the mountains around.
The exploration of space.
An exploration into how an abused child becomes an abuser. The exploration of literary texts.
Exploratory.
Exploratory.
He's going to have exploratory surgery on his knee.
Explore.
Explore.
Management need to explore ways of improving office security.
I'm going to explore the possibility of a part-time job. Venice is a wonderful city to explore.
Gingerly, she explored the bump on her head with her fingers.
Explorer.
Explorer.
Explosion.
Explosion.
Several people were injured in a bomb explosion.
We heard a loud explosion.
A massive explosion ripped through the building.
Police carried out a controlled explosion of the device.
The population explosion in India.
The recent explosion of interest in Latin music and dance. The recent explosion of interest in Latin music and dance.
An explosion of laughter. Explosive.
Explosive.
Because the gas is highly explosive, it needs to be kept in high-pressure containers.
A small explosive device was set off outside the UN headquarters today. A small explosive device was set off outside the UN headquarters today. A small explosive device was set off outside the UN headquarters today.
The explosive force of volcanoes.
He's good at defusing potentially explosive situations.
The explosive issue of uncontrolled immigration.
Both men suddenly spoke in the same explosive tone of voice. Both men suddenly spoke in the same explosive tone of voice.
The explosive growth of microcomputers.
Expo.
Expo.
Exponent.
Exponent.
A leading exponent of desktop publishing.
The most famous exponent of this approach to art was probably Charles Rennie Mackintosh. The most famous exponent of this approach to art was probably Charles Rennie Mackintosh. The most famous exponent of this approach to art was probably Charles Rennie Mackintosh. The most famous exponent of this approach to art was probably Charles Rennie Mackintosh.
Exponential.
Exponential.
An exponential increase in travel.
Export.
Export.
A ban on the export of toxic waste.
Bales of cloth for export to the continent. Bales of cloth for export to the continent. Bales of cloth for export to the continent.
Wheat is one of the country's main exports.
The company exports tuna to the U.S.
Italian food has been exported all over the world.
Exporter.
Exporter.
With the expanded production of North Sea oil and gas, the UK has become a net exporter of fuel. With the expanded production of North Sea oil and gas, the UK has become a net exporter of fuel.
Japan is a leading exporter of textiles.
Expose.
Expose.
He lifted his t-shirt to expose a jagged scar across his chest. He lifted his t-shirt to expose a jagged scar across his chest. Potatoes turn green when exposed to light.
The report revealed that workers had been exposed to high levels of radiation.
The film exposes the utter horror of war.
The report exposes the weaknesses of modern medical practice. The report exposes the weaknesses of modern medical practice.
The Baron was exposed as a liar and a cheat. The Baron was exposed as a liar and a cheat. Some children are never exposed to classical music.
I'm afraid I might expose my real feelings for him.
An exposé of corrupt practices by lawyers.
Exposé.
Exposé.
An exposé of corrupt practices by lawyers.
Exposed.
Exposed.
An exposed coastline.
The side of the garden most exposed to wind.
All exposed skin should be covered with protective cream. All exposed skin should be covered with protective cream.
The old fort was very exposed.
These developments leave the British government in an exposed position.
Exposition.
Exposition.
A lucid exposition of educational theories.
Ex post facto law.
Ex post facto law.
Expostulate.
Expostulate.
Exposure.
Exposure.
Prolonged exposure to the sun can cause skin cancer.
The exposure of his underground political activity. Her fear of exposure as a spy. The failure of their marriage has got a lot of exposure recently.
The visit to Germany gave them exposure to the language.
Her brief exposure to pop stardom.
We nearly died of exposure on the mountainside. I have 3 exposures left on this roll.
My bedroom has a southern exposure.
Expound.
Expound.
She's always expounding on the latest dogmas of feminism. Express.
Express.
Bill's not afraid to express his opinions.
Parents have expressed their concerns about their children's safety.
She expressed an interest in seeing York.
Express your reasons for applying in simple terms. Express your reasons for applying in simple terms.
She doesn't express her emotions as much as he does.
Finally, I'd like to express my sincere thanks to all those who have helped today.
The USA expressed reservations before agreeing to sign the agreement. The USA expressed reservations before agreeing to sign the agreement.
Many people have expressed their opposition to the proposals.
Young children often have difficulty expressing themselves. He first learnt to express himself through movement at his dance classes. He first learnt to express himself through movement at his dance classes. Words can't express how angry we felt.
Religious faith expresses itself in a variety of ways. Religious faith expresses itself in a variety of ways.
Express 3/4 as a decimal.
The value of the coffee becomes significantly higher when expressed in foreign currency. The value of the coffee becomes significantly higher when expressed in foreign currency. The value of the coffee becomes significantly higher when expressed in foreign currency.
The school was founded with the express purpose of teaching deaf children. The school was founded with the express purpose of teaching deaf children.
He is not to leave without my express permission.
Matthew left express instructions to keep all doors locked.
Express lanes on the freeway. An express line at a supermarket.
Expression.
Expression.
I decided to go to the meeting as an expression of support.
The letter was a genuine expression of sympathy.
Student leaders are demanding greater freedom of expression.
The Socialist Party was founded to give political expression to the working classes.
Another writer who seeks to give expression to popular oral culture is José María Arguedas.
An expression of surprise.
There was a blank expression on her face.
In the photograph, he seemed devoid of facial expression.
A pained expression crossed her face.
The old-fashioned expression, in the family way, means pregnant. The old-fashioned expression, in the family way, means pregnant. After the climb, we were absolutely knackered, if you'll pardon the expression. Expressionism.
Expressionism.
The Expressionist movement.
Expressionless.
Expressionless.
A blank expressionless stare.
Expressive.
Expressive.
Her wonderfully expressive eyes.
Her poem is expressive of calm days and peace of mind.
Expressly.
Expressly.
He was expressly forbidden to speak to the girl. The building is expressly designed to conserve energy. The building is expressly designed to conserve energy.
Express mail.
Express mail.
Expropriate.
Expropriate.
Expressway.
Expressway.
Expropriate.
Expropriate.
Expulsion.
Expulsion.
The expulsion of the protesters.
His expulsion from the Soviet Union in 1964.
The headmaster threatened the boys with expulsion.
The expulsion from the party of its former leader.
Expunge.
Expunge.
I wanted to expunge the memory of that first race from my mind.
Expurgated.
Expurgated.
An expurgated version of her writings.
Exquisite.
Exquisite.
The most exquisite craftsmanship.
She has exquisite taste in art.
Ex-serviceman.
Ex-serviceman.
Ex-servicewoman.
Ex-servicewoman.
Extant.
Extant.
Few of the manuscripts are still extant. Few of the manuscripts are still extant.
Extemporaneous.
Extemporaneous.
An extemporaneous speech.
Extempore.
Extempore.
An extempore speech.
Extemporize.
Extemporize.
Extend.
Extend.
Management have agreed to extend the deadline.
Some of our courses extend over 2 years.
The government has extended the ban on the import of beef until June.
The River Nile extends as far south as Lake Victoria.
The shelf extends 20 centimetres from the bookcase.
We plan to extend the kitchen by 6 feet.
My duties at the school extend beyond just teaching.
The vote was extended to all women aged 21 and over in 1928.
British Coal is planning to extend its operations in Wales.
We can extend our insurance cover to travel abroad.
We'd like to extend a warm welcome to our French visitors.
I'd like to extend my thanks to all the catering staff. I'd like to extend my thanks to all the catering staff.
The coroner extended his sympathy to the victim's family.
The head teacher has extended an invitation to the Prime Minister to visit the school.
The banks have decided to extend credit to the company.
George extended his hand.
Manchester United extended their lead at the top of the table to 10 points.
Extended. Extended.
An extended business trip.
The computer uses extended memory.
If you are going abroad for an extended period of time, you should consider renting your house out.
An extended analysis of the film.
Extended family.
Extended family.
Extension.
Extension.
The extension of the Jubilee Underground line.
The planned extension to the National Museum. A loft extension.
Donald's been given an extension to finish his thesis.
The pub's got an extension tonight.
The extension of the copyright laws to cover online materials.
An extension of the powers of the European Parliament.
Can I have extension 316, please?
Do you know Mr. Brown's extension number?
My primary responsibility is to the pupils, and by extension to the teachers and parents. My primary responsibility is to the pupils, and by extension to the teachers and parents.
Extension lead.
Extension lead.
Extensive.
Extensive.
The house stands in extensive grounds.
Fire has caused extensive damage to the island's forests. Fire has caused extensive damage to the island's forests.
The extensive use of pesticides.
Extensive research is being done into the connection between the disease and poor living conditions.
The exhibition has received extensive coverage in the national press.
As a student, he travelled extensively in the Middle East.
Extenuating.
Extenuating.
Extent.
Extent.
We all, to some extent, remember the good times and forget the bad.
I do agree with him to an extent.
Its success will depend to a large extent on local attitudes.
It will affect farmers in Spain and to a lesser extent in France. It will affect farmers in Spain and to a lesser extent in France. It will affect farmers in Spain and to a lesser extent in France.
They examined the extent to which age affected language learning ability. They examined the extent to which age affected language learning ability. To what extent did she influence his decision?
Violence increased to the extent that residents were afraid to leave their homes.
Considering the extent of his injuries, he's lucky to be alive. Considering the extent of his injuries, he's lucky to be alive. It's too early to assess the full extent of the damage.
They opened out the nets to their full extent.
The region is over 10,000 square kilometres in extent.
Extenuating.
Extenuating.
Exterior.
Exterior.
The exterior of the factory.
The dome is tiled on the exterior.
Beneath that calm exterior, he has a fierce will to win. Beneath that calm exterior, he has a fierce will to win.
The exterior walls need a new coat of paint. The exterior walls need a new coat of paint.
Information that is exterior to the text itself.
Exterminate.
Exterminate.
Staff use the poison to exterminate moles and rabbits.
The extermination of the indigenous peoples.
Extern.
Extern.
A finance major who is an extern with Merrill Lynch.
External.
External.
The external appearance of the building.
Low birth weight may be caused by external factors, such as smoking during pregnancy. Influences from the external environment. Information from external sources.
China will not tolerate any external interference in its affairs.
The Minister of External Affairs. The job should be advertised internally and externally.
Externalize.
Externalize.
Externals.
Externals.
Externship.
Externship.
An externship in a law firm.
Extinct.
Extinct.
Dinosaurs have been extinct for millions of years.
Pandas could become extinct in the wild.
An extinct species.
Extinction.
Extinction.
Species in danger of extinction.
The breed was on the verge of extinction.
They were hunted almost to extinction. Conservationists are trying to save the whale from extinction.
Many endangered species now face extinction.
Their traditional way of life seems doomed to extinction.